is one of the keynote speakers at the Singularity Summit. Hugo DeGaris has flown down from China and has recently just retired from working at the China Brain Lab in Xiamen, funded by, was it the Xiamen University or by the Chinese government itself? Both. Okay, so he's going to be talking about what's called the Artilect War, and I'll hand you over to Hugo to let you know what it's all about.
It's nice to be back in Australia. I left when I was 23, and I'm now 60, and retired, just recently retired. So the main reason for coming back was Adam, and to see my old father, who is 91. In fact, just last night, had dinner with him. I have to fly to New York in 2 days, so I was waving goodbye to him. So, in 2 days, I will be flown to New York, and I hope this is encouraging news. To do what? To do a History Channel 2-hour special on this stuff. So it's reaching mainstream in the US. And thanks to this event, I hope hit the journalists hard. It will be common knowledge. It will just be part of the educated person's general knowledge. Go back 5 years. Ask yourself, how much were you aware of, let's say, the climate change, global warming issue, compared to what you have today? I mean, you can't escape it. It's in all the media. So it won't be at all surprised within 5 years, especially in the English-speaking countries, it will be the same. It will just be part of the general person's general knowledge, educated person's general knowledge on this issue. Okay, so that program is History Channel. So I've traveled to lots of countries, and you can get History Channel almost all over the world. So the producers of this program estimate that literally hundreds of millions of people will see it, which is just great. So the issue will get up. Okay. In a minute, in 1 minute, like the punchline, the summary. What's my message? I'm claiming that this century's global politics, I mean, as big an issue as the question of who should own capital was for the 19th and 20th. That just translates into communalism, communally owned capital, or communism for short, and capitalism, the capitaliste, is the French word for people who own the capital. So the issue of should the factories, should the machines be controlled privately or publicly? That issue dominated our global politics for over a century. And I can remember when I was 15 years old at junior high school, listening to my teachers, one saying to the other, "Is today the last day?" Now, I was born 47 plus 15 is 62. What happened in 1962? The Cuban Missile Crisis. And if you've seen the movie 13 Days, they were that close to a nuclear war. And what was that all about? It was basically over the question who should own capital. It's this highly divisive issue that split humanity right down the middle. And I mean literally the middle. Only a few decades ago, half of the world's population were living under Marxist regimes. I live in one today. It won't last much longer, maybe 10 years or so. And I see within about 40 years, if you look at the graph, like vertical axis is the percentage of countries that are still dictatorships, one-party systems. This is time, and it's coming down almost in a straight line. So you can predict in about 40 years there won't be a single dictatorship left. So then we'll be living in a totally democratic world, democratic countries tend not to go to war with each other. We can get rid of wars, we can get rid of the arms trade, we can get rid of global poverty. The internet is doubling its speed every year. Call it BRAD, B-R-A-D, bit rate, annual doubling. So imagine, and the physicist in me says that this train can go on for virtually forever, right? Information has no limit on the size of its embodiment. You have to put information on something, but the something can be as small as you like. So I see no limit, effectively, to just how many bits you could transmit per second. So 40 years, that's 2 to the 40, that's a trillion. Do the math. So what could you do with an internet that was a trillion times faster than today's? Wow. Well, you can have vividly realistic three-dimensional images. You could give everyone on the planet everything. So that will lead to a cultural homogenization, a global language, and I hope in time, a global government. My second book, now this is the theme of the first book, which I think is hugely more important, the idea of species dominance. Do human beings remain number one, species or not? But the second one is about global government. And it's not selling at all. Every day I go into Amazon, click. 4.8 million? Oh my God. It's not selling. I guess the idea of a global state, a global government is just not in the air. Pity. Anyway, okay, so global politics will be dominated, I see, by this issue of species dominance. I'll talk a bit about the technologies this century that will enable I call them artilects, that's artificial intellect, this godlike, massively intelligent machine with capacities literally, depending on how big we build them, but trillions of trillions, or trillions of trillions of trillions of times above the human level. So truly godlike. And the physics of computation says these things are possible. So I'm trying to take a longer term view, and that is that humanity sooner or later has to face up to this fundamental question. Do we, as a species, when I say we, I mean human beings, as a species, do we want to replace ourselves? Do we want to become number two? And that question is so fundamental that I see it dominating our global politics. And my conclusion is very gloomy. If you think back, 20th century, it was the bloodiest century in history. About 200 to 300 million people were killed for political reasons. Genocides, purges, ethnic cleansings, whatever. So my conclusion is very negative. I hope I'm wrong. But the most, in my view, the most realistic scenario is the worst. Obviously there are other scenarios, but as I see it, I hope it's reasoned, the most probable is the worst. Okay. So I'll begin the talk with, now I'm talking for about, I'm told, an hour and a half, so we can say a lot. I'll spend quite a bit of time on the technologies that are coming, and I guess I'm a part of the problem. I'm schizophrenic on this issue, very, very ambivalent. On the one hand, I'm in awe, A-W-E, just in awe of what we could become, looking at the bigger picture. There's a whole universe out there, right? And if the cosmologists are correct, it's just one universe, a bubble universe in a frost, a multiverse. So again, we have to scale down our importance. So at least in our universe, there are what? A trillion stars out there. Right? And our solar system is quite young. It's only about 5 billion years old. But we know that the Big Bang was 13.7, so nearly 14 billion years ago. So and we also know that most star systems have planets. And roughly about 1/10 of those, water is liquid. And so on. The Drake's, I suppose most of you have Drake's equation, tries to calculate an estimated number of intelligent civilizations in the galaxy. So it's highly likely that life is commonplace. The laws of physics and chemistry are the same throughout the whole universe. One of the greatest discoveries of science from the 19th century, optics. So we know the laws are the same everywhere. Planets are virtually everywhere. So probably life is virtually everywhere. Extremely commonplace, at least at bacterial level. So then, according to Drake, a certain percentage of those end up into an intelligent species. Well, then you get Fermi's famous question. Well, if intelligent life is so commonplace, where's the evidence? Where are they? Fermi's famous question. And a couple of years ago, I tried to dream up an answer to that. I mean, there's just one answer. I think life is commonplace. Intelligent species have evolved zillions of times in our galaxy. So then there's only a very small time window between an intelligent species being, let's say, at the nuclear level, or electronics level, and then to artilect or singularity for that level, just a few centuries. So that time window is very short. And then once the species either creates these artilects outside themselves, or does this, goes cyborg, adds components to your own brain, so you become a kind of god yourself. Cyborg, cybernetic organism, so part machine, part human. Although, I'll mention a bit later, this, I'll jump ahead a little. Just give you some numbers, give you a sense of the enormity of the problem that's coming. Now, my background is mathematical physics. I just did AI almost as an afterthought. Because I thought, hey, I could do AI, but I can't compete with the 200+ IQ guys who are the top guys dominating mathematical physics, because it's the toughest subject. Okay. So the physicist is telling me, if you look at Moore's law, in fact, if I pull this out, hold on, can I still do it? Yes, okay. I wrote this in China. Now, it's a few years old, so it's already a museum piece, but it gives you a feel. This little red memory stick contains 4G, 4 giga, 4 billion bits of information. I mean, go back 5 to 10 years, governments would have killed for this little piece of plastic. Right? So Moore's law, the idea that the number of transistors you can cram onto a single chip keeps doubling every year and a half or so. And that trend has been around since the mid-60s or so. That's when Gordon Moore, still alive.
That was an observation for the previous 30.
Yeah. Well, you can go, if you read Kurzweil, you can take it way back. But in terms of integrated circuits, ICs from 60s onwards. And it's, if you extrapolate that trend to about 2020, so a mere 10 years away, you're storing a single bit of information on one atom. Okay? Now let's start doing some big numbers. Question. How many atoms in this handheld object? So if you've done at least 12th grade chemistry, you know the answer is roughly Avogadro's number, which is order of magnitude, a trillion. Okay? 10 to the 24, or 1 and 24 zeros, a million. Now, if you're putting one bit of information on one atom, I don't know if the atom excited or not. What's the switching speed of an atom? Answer, about a femtosecond. That's a thousandth of a trillionth of a second. Okay? So let's imagine, several decades in the future, this object has been nanoteched to the point where every atom is now functioning as a computational unit. It's switching its bit. What then is the computational capacity in bits per second, or bit flips, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, in bit flips per second of this object? Well, it's the number of atoms, so 10 to the 24 times the number of bit flips per second per atom. Well, let's make it, say, 10 to the 16. Okay? So it's 10 to the 24 times 10 to the 16. That's 10 to the 40. 10 to the 40. Okay? Right? Now ask yourself a similar question. Well, what about the human brain? What's our equivalent information processing speed? What can we do? Well, you can estimate that. How many brain cells do we have? About 100 billion. That's 10 to the 11. 100 billion. And each brain cell connects roughly to about 10,000 others. Depends on which part of the brain. Cerebellum is more, on average, let's say. So that's 10 to the 4. Okay? And each connection between two brain cells, called a synapse, you know in neuroscience, synapse, connection between two cells. At maximum, those synapses are transmitting a signal at a rate of about, let's say, 10 bits a second. It's a bit high, but roughly. So 10 to the 1. Okay, multiply all those three. 100 billion brain cells connected 10 to the 4 by 10 to the 1. That's 10 to 16. 10 to the power 16 bits a second. Do you remember the number I gave for that? 10 to the 40. Now the physicists, the math physicists in me, that's enough. All the rest, all the future historical politics and all those issues follow from those numbers. I'm a numbers guy. To me, ultimately, everything is numbers. Like, if you push me on the quasi-religious issue, I'm not a theist. I think theism is ridiculous. The idea that it's a loving God. I mean, 300 million people died last century. That's out for me. But deism, the idea of a creator, I'm much more open to that. Physics is just, physics and cosmology. There are certain parameters in the laws of physics to enable our universe to exist, which are so fantastically, improbably finely tuned to allow matter to exist. Now, I'm talking anthropic, but I see a few heads shaking. But anyway, maybe we can discuss. We will have what? What was it? It's an hour and a half, right? And then there's a panel session.
Exactly an hour, because
okay.
we started a bit late.
All right.
If you want to talk for 1 hour and a half, then there'll be no questions.
Okay, well, I'll cut it short. Okay, so for me, the writing is on the wall. Given the technologies can outclass our human brain capacity by a factor of a trillion, do the difference? 10 to 24, 10 to the 40? No, sorry, 10 to the 16, 10 to the 40. So that's a difference of 10 to the 24. That's a trillion. So the future capacity of these machines, these artilects as I call them, is just so vastly superior to what we are that it's inevitable. Like the vision that we, in a few decades, we'll have machines at human level intelligence. Fine, and that will create all kinds of issues. But the bigger question is, this vastly superior potential. That's what I see as will drive the ideologists and the intellectuals on this dominant, as I see, dominant issue for this century. Okay. How long have I spoken? I should keep time. When do I stop?
Well, then the panel
I'll speak
Just
1
get
hour.
it going, and I'll put some bits of paper up telling you how long.
But I'm trying to calculate my rate. 2 days ago, we videoed, and you talked for 4 hours.
Probably got about half an hour to 45 minutes.
Okay, so all right. So now and that's just the beginning. What I've just told you. Now, probably everyone in this room has heard of nanotech. Nanometer meaning a billionth of a meter. Now, one of the research issues that I'm fascinated by is, now that I'm retired, I'm shifting away from doing artificial brain type research to doing something that's been sitting at the back of my mind for about 20 years, and a question that fascinates me, and that is, what's next? What's after nanotech? If you look at the scale of an atom is roughly, what, about a tenth of a nanometer, so 10 to the minus 10 of a meter. Well, what's smaller than an atom? Well, a nucleus. Right? There's nothing in between. You go, woo, you jump 5 orders of magnitude from an atom to the nucleus. So there will be no, what would be the word? Hetatech? What's 10 to the minus 12? What's the usual? Pico. Yeah, pico. There's no picotech. Nature doesn't allow it. It's either the atom or the nucleus. So you have to jump to femto, which is 10 to the minus 15. But femto what? So I tend to prefer lately the term Fermi. Now, the Fermi is a unit of length. It's a femtometer. So I just talk about Fermitech. So one of the things I really want to look into is, so now that I'm retired, I'm a night person. I go to bed at 8 in the morning. So I have no constraints, I'm totally free, it's absolutely intoxicating. So if you want to retire early, and you like reading books and studying, then I can replicate my lifestyle. So. Love the peace of the night. About half of you are morning people, you're larks. Right? Some of us are owls. Well, I'm definitely an owl. I just like the peace of the night. And I can concentrate and I just get so much more done. So what I'm doing now is looking into the possibility of a Fermitech or femtotech. The question is, what phenomena in physics, fundamental phenomena, way down at quark level, so elementary particles and quantum field theory and topological quantum field theory and that kind of stuff. What phenomena is going on down there that just maybe, sort of big question for that, just maybe serve as the basis for a Fermitech? Now I don't know the answer. And you can Google femtotech, and you'll get lots of people asking the question, but no one's giving any answers. The closest I've seen was in fact a science fiction story by Forward about these creatures who lived on the surface of a neutron star, and they were femto creatures. So everything was speeded up, and they were very primitive, but they made contact with humans, so the humans were sending down their computer databases of human knowledge. And then, they just leapt forward at their femto speeds, because everything they're doing is moving ahead at 1 million times faster than nano speed, the chemical speed that we're at. So if a Fermitech comes, think what it would be to nanotech, as nanotech is to millitech. So if you scale everything down by a factor of 1 million, firstly in terms of density, so you've got 1 million times more objects or things in your unit space, so you've got 1 million by 1 million by 1 million. So that's 1 million cubed. And then because all the little gizmos, the little things, are now 1 million times closer, so So the interaction speeds, if you know any particle physics, the gluons, right, they're communicating 1,000,000 times faster between the quarks. So who knows, there may be a future gluonics, like electronics. Manipulation of electrons, electronics. So if there were a gluonics or whatever, then femtotech or fermitech would outdo nanotech in terms of performance by a factor of 1,000,000,000,000, right? A million times 1,000,000 of speed. So who knows? Maybe these advanced civilizations that are out there, that have been around for billions of years longer than we have. I mean, if you push that argument to its limit, you know, the smaller the scale, the faster everything is, the higher the performance level. So you come to the almost farcical conclusion that there are whole civilizations in elementary particles. It's hard to avoid. It sounds crazy. But that's one of the questions I'm fascinated by, is the possibility of a femto or fermitech. All right, other technologies. Is there a laser pointer? No? No laser pointer? Well, I assume most people know about nanotech. Programmed atom level control. You put an atom wherever you want to. You can build machines using atomic level precision. You can make little computers, put zillions of them into your bloodstream, program them to detect cancer cells, wipe out cancer, wipe out bacteria, clean out your clogged, hamburgered arteries. So program aging cells to rejuvenate, do the same thing to your body cells as what we do to our sperm and egg cells. So immortality. So just the impact of nanotech will be highly significant.
So we don't have any of that technology.
Yet.
No, that's true. But we don't have the famous clue how any of that stuff would work.
Yeah, but it's coming. I mean,
That's just fate.
I don't think so. You just look at Nature and science journals, and every day, every week, there's something. It's definitely coming. Well, how about let me finish the 1 hour talk, and then we can have a really lively debate. If you chop it up, I think you'll miss the flow. Okay, G, evolutionary engineering. I see that as playing a major part in the debate over species dominance. If you ask the question, how is it logically possible for some creature of a certain level of intelligence to create another creature that's smarter? Seems a bit paradoxical, doesn't it? How can that be? Well, in a sense, we've been doing that for a long time, in the sense that some of our children grow up smarter than we do. It happens all the time. So what's happening there? Why did these children end up smarter than their parents? Like I'm smarter than both my parents. It's been a problem.
Society's demanding more kids.
It's also genetic. and believe me, as a teacher, you are, probably a lot of teachers here. You are very conscious as a teacher of the bell curve. Right? You'll get this odd student occasionally, 1 in 1,000 or whatever, who's just genetically super more intelligent than the rest. Right? Just one of these outliers. Okay, so how does that happen? And it's the quick simple answer is basically the genetic mix is different. Right? You have two parents swap mix their genes. You get a combination of genes that just allows a greater structural complexity or whatever, which allows a greater intelligence. So by analogy, I can imagine these future creatures, if we decide to build them, they will improve themselves, suggestion, by devoting a part of themselves to genetic evolutionary experiments. Right? They'll just make random mutations to their structure. and then another part of them will observe the results, and if it seems superior, well then they can integrate those new experimental results into themselves. And all this is going on at nano speeds, right? So these these artilects could upgrade themselves in the time it takes me to say one word.
Read by artists themselves?
Sorry, can I just discourage comments from the audience?
Because we've got about an hour.
We've
got an hour for discussion time, right? So, okay, well, there's a lot of material to get through. Okay, so evolutionary engineering I see is playing a very important role in the creation of these artilects. And later, when we get onto the politics, the people who are opposed to building these godlike machines, they will use this evolutionary argument as one of their arguments against producing them. Quantum computing, that's another one of my research interests. It's the mathematical physics background. Are most of you guys IT people? Do most of you have an IT background? Oh yeah, okay. So I guess a lot of you have heard of the potential of quantum computing, right? Using quantum mechanical phenomena to compute with. Now, if you've studied quantum computing principles, you'll know that a quantum computer can outperform a classical computer, like
Your desktop?
if you have a monoprocessor in your classical computer, you can compute, you can execute one instruction at a time. Okay? Instructions comes into the central processor, out comes the result, it rearranges the bits a little bit, and then that result gets sent back into memory. So fetch, execute, store, fetch, execute, store, fetch, execute, store. But still, one instruction at a time. With a quantum computer, if you have n bits in your register, but now they're quantum bits, they're just bits. They can be more than just 0 or 1. They can be like any weighted sum of those. So if you have n of them, you can perform 2 to the power n things at a time. So a quantum computer, if it could be built so that it's robust, I'll talk about that in a minute, would outperform a classical computer by a factor of 2 to the n. Okay? So one of the reasons why I'm fascinated by this H, topological quantum computing, is that the topological part, hopefully, it's still heavily researched at the moment, but the main reason why quantum computers at large scale, where n is large, don't exist today is because they're so fragile. They're extremely vulnerable to local interference, local noise in the environment. For example, imagine this is an electron, and if it's spinning this way, let's interpret that as a 0. And if it's spinning the other way, let's interpret that as a 1. But it's an electron, right? It's tiny. And so if some other atom or whatever gets close and interacts with the electron, it's highly local, this is local. So that local interaction can change the state of this electron, and hence you lose the information. So it's the vulnerability of today's quantum computers. They do exist, but I think state of the art is about 8 bits or something. It's a joke, right? It's a computer with 1 byte. Right? So, but since '97, a Russian guy, he's in America now, invented the concept of topological quantum computing. Well, what's that? This is the teacher in me. So I'm taking off my shoe, and I want you to remember this, right? Visual memory, it'll stick with you. Get off the light. So I'm going to store information, just one bit, 0 or 1, by the angle of this shoelace. Okay? That's a 0, that's a 1. Okay? And then comes a bit of noise. Oh, lost the angle, lost the information. So now I'm going to store the information topologically, using topological property. I'm going to tie a knot in this shoelace. Now I can go that way, right? Or I can go the other way. There's two ways I can tie that elementary knot. And if I tie it one way, it's a 0. And if I tie it the other way, it's a 1. Okay? So I'll do it this way. Well, let's say that's a 0. And then comes some noise. Wow, it's still there. It is robust against local noise, local interference. Now, this is a crude analogy, but it gives you the idea. So, in theoretical physics, since the 80s, today's Einstein, I don't know if you heard the name, I mean, his stuff is just so hard to understand. The vast majority of people haven't a clue. But have you heard the name Ed Witten?
Yeah.
You heard the name Witten? He's reputed to be the smartest man on earth. Right? Everyone who talks to him comes away with a feeling of I'm talking to Shakespeare or something. Okay. So since he's been around, the last 20 years, mathematical physics and pure mathematics have merged. Right? They're influencing each other. Before that, theoretical physics was largely parasitical on pure math. They just take their math from the mathematicians. But since Witten and others, the two have merged, and they're now attending each other's seminars and learning from each other. There's a real synergy going on between pure math and math physics lately. Anyway, he invented a new branch of quantum field theory. If you've done any quantum mechanics, maybe sort of, I don't know, third, fourth year undergrad, and then you'd probably start doing quantum field theory at master's level. Well, there are ways to describe quantum fields using topological ideas. So you have to learn a lot of topology. Right? So you have to go into pure math and bring all those tools with you to understand topological quantum field theory. And by using those ideas, you can insert computing. Right? You can put information into topological quantum fields. Now, don't ask me, it's not easy, but just go away with the take-home message. You can store information robustly. Okay? And the physical phenomena that gets used to do that, the only entity today known in physics that has these weird topological quantum field properties, they're called anyons. Any, like, they have any spin. They're not fermions, they're not bosons. They can have any spin. I can't get this knot undone, so it's really robust. So in 2005, the so-called condensed matter physics people found the first enyon, experimentally. And since 2002, one of the Fields Medal, you know the significance of a Fields Medal? It's sort of like the Nobel Prize in math, and it's only every 4 years, and it's much harder to get. Well, anyway, one of the winners of a Fields Medal, a topologist, he discovered the mathematics needed to do topological quantum computing. Now, how do you do that? Well, here's an enyon. What is an enyon? I'll tell you briefly. Here's a slice of silicon. Okay? And imagine it's like two slices of bread, like this. And the gap here, where you have the meat, is so thin that even the wavelength of one electron is bigger. So the electron cannot move up and down. Can't. You can only move that way. So these electrons live in a two-dimensional world, right? in the sandwich between two layers of silicon. Now, take that sandwich and cool it almost to zero. So several thousandths of a Kelvin. Incredibly incredibly cold, and then put very strong magnetic fields this way. And then you get something called the quantum Hall effect. So it's a phenomenon in condensed matter physics. And you think, well, so what? I mean, that would be simpler, wouldn't it, than ordinary three-dimensional phenomena that we're all used to. But no, the fascinating thing is it's more complex. It's richer in its physics than what's going on in 3 dimensions. And what happens is, like, zillions of these electrons, because they're free to move this way in 2 dimensions, under these conditions of extreme cold and extremely high magnetic fields, they agglomerate, they form these sort of huge groups, like hundreds of billions of them. And they behave like a particle. Now, they're not a particle because they're electrons, groups of electrons. So they're called quasi-particles. And they have weird properties, totally weird. They have this topological property. Okay? So let's say, here's a chip, a future chip, an anion chip. They don't exist yet. They're being designed, but imagine they come into being. So here's one anion, here's another one. How do you compute with anions? Well, it's amazingly simple. All you do is just do this. You swap them. And you can do that in 2 ways. But what's really interesting is the actual path you take. For example, if I do this, if I swap those 2 anions inside the chip, and I do it this way, the result is the same. It's really important what I'm saying. The result is the same as if I do it like this. It's path independent. So we're talking about a topological property. The only thing that matters is, did you swap them clockwise or anti-clockwise? That's all that matters. The actual path of the swapping is irrelevant. And you say, so what? Well, think about it. If when you're swapping it like this, with a long path, there's some local interaction here, it doesn't matter. So it's robust against local noise. And if you have that robustness, you then have a way to scale up quantum computers. And if you have quantum computers, everything changes. I mean, what could you do with a machine that could outperform a classical computer by a factor 2 to the n? Well, any chemists here? Okay, so imagine you're a quantum chemist. Right? Imagine your specialty is using a computer to simulate the behavior at quantum level of a molecule. Every time you add one more atom to that molecule, the size of your problem, the search space, use technical term, the Hilbert space, goes up by a factor of 2. Problem size doubles. So you add a few more atoms, and very quickly your classical computer will just run out of memory space. 2 to the n, you get the exponential explosion. But if you have quantum computer, its power goes up 2 to the n. The problem size goes up 2 to the n, but the 2 match. If you need more computing capacity, we just add another qubit, right? And how many qubits could you add? Well, how about a trillion? So what is 2 to the trillion? So what I'm saying is, this is just the beginning. The math physicist in me, and there's also definitely a political side to me as well, I try to put the 2 together, try to anticipate the political consequences of future technologies, future science. And yet you come to some really scary conclusions. So, with TQC, Fermi-tech, and so on, all these things that will be coming this century, and what impact will that have on the species dominance debate? Okay, well, we've talked about that. So, even at nanotech scale, these machines, these artilects, could outperform the human brain by about a factor of trillion. All right, so now I'll switch caps. I'll take off my math physics hat, and now I'll put on my politician hat and try to anticipate what's going to happen. Okay. I'm in China. Why China? I hate the government. It's the greatest criminal organization in history, mostly under Mao Zedong, killed about, estimated, 80 million people. In the Great Famine, in the Great Leap Forward, 58 to 60, 62, about 30 or 40 million Chinese died just through the sheer incompetence and peasant-like lack of scientific knowledge of Mao Zedong, the greatest tyrant in history. But probably most of you think of Stalin, Hitler as history's greatest tyrant. No, it was Mao. It was Mao. About 80 million. Stalin, well, estimates vary, but the latest, best I've heard, about 60 million he killed, his purges and so on. And Hitler about 50 through the Second World War. And yet, that guy's face is on the present government's money. Yeah. Now, I travel a bit. Let me show you. That's Australian money. It's plastic, not paper. And that idea is going all over the world. Are you aware of that? Australia pioneered plastic money. Now the whole planet is copying. So that's first. There's some Hong Kong money. And here is China's money with a picture of history's greatest tyrant on the money. Now, I don't have a euro with me, but imagine I did. And so imagine this is a euro. Okay. And who's this guy? Oh, that's our friend Adolf. That's the reality. But still, they're doing something right. They're the world's highest economic growth rate country in the world. They've grown about 10% on average. And in the southeastern cities, it's more like 15% or more. And in the country's richest city, Shenzhen, which is just near Hong Kong, it's more like 30%. Like all the country's talent, all the dynamic, ambitious, brilliant, enterprising sort of people from a population of over 1 billion people is converging on Shenzhen, and it's just a hothouse of economic, intellectual activity. So if the present government there plays its cards right, they can advertise to the Chinese people that, look, do you want your country governed by a bunch of amateurs and see the world's highest economic growth rate evaporate? It's a very powerful argument, and I hope they're smart enough to do this. But anyway, probably in about 10 years, once China goes over the famous democratic economic threshold level of about $6,000 to $8,000 a year. Have you heard of a branch of political science called transitology, the study of transitions? Well, it's a branch of political science, and they ask themselves the question, well, given the last half century, about 100 countries, about half the countries in the world have made this switch from one-party dictatorships to multi-party democracies. When does that happen? Why does it happen? And well, the simple answer is basically it's just the rise of the middle class. You get educated people, they demand to have their voices heard, they just demand democracy, and they just intellectually, through the whole culture, undermine what's the word?
Demagoguery.
Yeah, they delegitimate, right? They just make the belief in the one-party system just fade away. People just stop believing it anymore. The way people stop believing in slavery or witchcraft, it just delegitimates it. So I expect that process to happen in about 10 years. And then what? Well, then a fifth of humanity goes democratic, they will then insert themselves into the world community. For example, where I'm living in China, I have to illegally, if I want to get world television, CNN, BBC, Australian World News, NHK World, if I want the TV of about a dozen major countries, I have to put up an antenna illegally, not allowed. Most Chinese do not know what damage Mao Zedong did or what the party. They're just ignorant. They're kept ignorant. The internet is censored. If you were speaking Chinese on some street corner in China, saying these things, you would be disappeared. Meaning you'd be shipped out to some, in Chinese they're called Lao Ga, which is sort of like the Russian equivalent of the Gulag. There's still about 1,000 of these so-called labor camps in China. Right? So it's still a government of thugs. I mean, it has to go. And when it goes, then China, I believe, will become a major force. They have a lot of intelligence. Their self-image is to be the dominant nation. I mean, if you look at their history from about the fall of Roman Empire until Europe's Renaissance, they were dominant. So it's just part of their self-image, and they feel themselves this century roaring back to take their old place as the dominant nation. So, I mean, I have a loathing of the government, but I have an enormous respect for the culture, the people, and it's very exciting to live there. Right? You have to be careful what you say. I'm taking a risk right now. I mean, think about it. Because Adam's video will go all over the world, including 100,000 whatever Chinese students in the United States and Australia. I mean, I go to the Botanic Gardens, my favourite spot in Melbourne, and what do I see? Just thousands of Chinese tourists. Things have changed, and it's just the beginning, believe me. Believe me. Australia in 10 years will be flooded by Chinese tourists. Right? There's 1.3 billion of them out there, getting richer at a rate of about 10% per year. Okay. So why China? Well, it's a simple argument. If this culture is to become this century's dominant culture, then I think it's appropriate that that culture lead the species dominance debate. If this question becomes the dominant issue for the 21st century, then I feel China, and the world of course, should lead it, push it. How many more minutes?
Half an hour.
Okay. All right. So the guy who took over my job, I'm now retired. What was that job? I was director of the Artificial Brain Lab in a city called Xiamen. And I don't know if you know the name. He's the father of AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, Ben Goertzel. Anyway, so he's pretty well my best friend. So he's taken over now this role, and he wants the resources that America is not giving him. He and others, feeling increasingly America is losing it. For a start, one-third of the American population is classified as overweight, and the other third is classified as obese. Right? And you ask yourself, what effect does that have on the national energy level? And it must have some effect. If you're carrying around extra 20, 30 kilos per day, it must sap the level of energy you have in your daily work. And of course the population is aging. So. And cultures rise and fall. I speak fluent French. I've seen the French in the 90s once they started getting European television, like in Europe, a lot of your travellers, you go to Europe and in your living room you can zap cultures. Right? French television, German television, Italian, English, Spanish, Belgian, the way Americans can zap football channels. So when the French in the 90s got European television, they lost their arrogance. I've been out of touch. In Australian culture, is there a sort of stereotype of how arrogant the French can be?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We.
Well, see, yeah, I speak French. The French, for me, are the most sophisticated people in Europe, and hence, in some ways, the world. They sneer at Americans. They look down at Americans. They're greatly resentful that this parvenu culture, this middle class, colonial, unsophisticated peasant culture has dominated them. So they hated that. They call America. But in the 90s, they became aware, because of European television, that the British had won far more Nobel Prizes than they had. The German economy was far greater and more dynamic. The Scandinavian cultures were culturally far more advanced in their attitudes, 10, 20 years ahead. And the French intellectuals just felt whammy. They went from arrogant to sort of depressed. Ooh, nous, les petits Français. Oui, the little French. Okay. So I've seen that happen to Britain. The Brits live in the past. Do you get the proms? Yeah. And the last day, the last night at the proms.
Yep.
And all these Brits waving their flags, living in the past, a century ago. So America will go through that phase soon, in 5 to 10 years. Americans are still extremely insular. I lived 5 years in America, but my American friends will say, yes, but Hugo, you lived in Utah. That's not America. That's the Mormon culture. So, well, maybe. But still, cultures rise and fall. Now, I've lived in 7 of them. I grew up in Australia. You probably hear my Aussie accent, but do you hear more American or British influence? I was living in England in the 20s, in my 20s. Like, I was a prof, and I'd have my class, and I'd say something, and there'd just be blank stares. And I'm thinking, let's see, was that Aussie, Brit, or American? Obviously it wasn't American. Okay. So America will go through that de-arrogantanizing, whatever the word is, phase soon, I predict. And then it will be the turn of China and India. And possibly Europe. Europe today is about, I'm speaking the EU, the European Union. It's 27 countries. There are 8 more in the pipeline. It's already about 600 million. Right? Sarkozy, French president, is talking about a Mediterranean Union. So he wants to bring in all the North African Arab cultures into the Union. Merkel, the German chancellor, is pushing hard in Washington for the creation of an Atlantic Union. Okay? So the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Area, and the EU. And why? To compete with the future giants of China and India, who are members of the Billion Club. So if America doesn't change its tune, if it does not lose its insular-minded arrogance, it will just not be a player this century. This century's players are in the Billion Club. You said that now?
I'm saying.
Watch the top.
We had
Okay. So one of the reasons I'm in China, well, again, let me give you the countries. So Australia, England, Holland, Belgium, Japan, America, China. So I'm no nationalist. I feel I've outgrown the nation state. In a sense, I feel foreign everywhere. price you pay for being a real multi-meaning, multicultural. But China is exciting because it's changing so fast. So I have my father's longevity genes, I think. How old do I look?
Not 65. 102.
Well, most people say about 50, so they get it wrong by about a decade. So I'm hoping to get to 90. I've lost 20 kilos the last 6 months, deliberately. Becoming a lot more health conscious. I want to be around.
So the Ray and Terry supplements.
Just eating less, it's cheaper. So after about 10 years, once China's gone democratic, then I hope I and a billion others will be free to speak their minds. And then I expect a great surge of Chinese creativity. All right. So let's switch to the politics in terms of the technology. What's going to happen? What's probably the most likely scenario that will lead to the general public, the billions, becoming extremely conscious of this issue of species dominance? What is the issue? Should humanity build artilects? Should humanity build these godlike, massively intelligent machines and utterly replace ourselves? We would be creating our successors, or becoming our successors ourselves, if you go cyborg. But if you think about it, a cyborg and an artilect, a pure artilect, a pure machine, is virtually the same thing. I mean, in the media, well, let's say it's 2070, more or less, okay? You're a young mother, you've just given birth, and it's in the air, it's just part of the cultural norm. As a mother, you decide, would you like your newly born baby to become a cyborg? So you take 1 grain of sugar that's been nanoteched, 1 bit per atom, switching in femtoseconds. There is more computing capacity in that grain of sugar compared to the human brain by a factor of, I haven't worked it out, billions, trillions? So imagine the mother decides that she will convert her baby into a cyborg, cybernetic organism, part machine, part human. Well, so she adds, well, surgeon, whatever, adds a grain of sugar into the baby's brain. The grain of sugar integrates into the human mind and totally takes over. Why? Well, the computing capacity of that grain of sugar is 99.9999999% of the total. And the human part, the baby part, is 0.000. So effectively, that mother has, well, in a sense, killed the baby. Killed in the sense it's no longer human. It's an artilect. Effectively, it's an artilect. So from the point of view of the people who will be there, they're called Terrans, they're the people who are opposed to human beings becoming number 2. From their point of view, there's no distinction between an advanced cyborg and an artilect. Purely in terms of the vast numbers, the computational capacity that these future technologies will create. Okay. So how's all this going to play out? What's the most likely scenario? Well, Moore's law will continue to be valid. Okay? Moore's law is having a huge impact on the neurosciences. In fact, Ben Goetzel and I, just recently, weeks from now, the Planet's first special issue in a journal, academic journal, on the theme of artificial brains will come out. And it's in the neurocomputing journal. because of Moore's law, artificial brain research projects are popping up like mushrooms all over the planet. And so we said, hey, the time is right to have a special issue on the topic. So we invited all the top guys, you know, to send in stuff. So that will appear in a matter of weeks. So the time is right. Artificial brain technology is happening. And why is it happening? And why now? Rather than 10 years ago or 10 years in the future? Why now? Well, because well, lots of reasons, but the main one, I suppose, is because Moore's law is allowing it. Right? Today's supercomputers, what's their bit rate per second? Sort of petaflop, right? Petaflop. And remember before saying the bit rate equivalent of the human brain was about 10 to the 16? So they're almost comparable. But a rapid bit processing rate is not sufficient to generate artificial intelligence. It's not enough. It's a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. So what else do you need to make it sufficient? Well, obvious answer is, well, you need to have the knowledge of the neurocircuitry. Right? How do our brains wire up? What's the microcircuitry needed? Well, because of Moore's law, all these powerful new tools like supercomputers that can simulate highly complex, large-scale neural networks. So artificial brains increasingly are being simulated in supercomputers. So that's why now. It's only about now that Moore's law is allowing all this to happen. So governments around the world are pouring research money into artificial brain production. Okay? Now, the Koreans, South Koreans, those guys are amazing. They had a sort of inferiority complex against their children, the Japanese. Any Japanese here? You cannot tell the Japanese that they are descended from Korea. Japanese are profound. I mean, I lived 8 years in Japan. My God, what a racist culture there. They live isolated several hundred kilometers from any nearest neighbor. They're 98% one culture, the most homogeneous culture on the planet, and utterly cut off from the rest of the world. So if you tell them that about 2,000 years ago, there was some major political event in China, northern China, and about 1 million Koreans fled for their lives in a kind of boat people type incident, fled to Japan. And you can do DNA tests on Koreans and Japanese, and it's obvious. They're Koreans. Now, if you say that the early emperors in Japan are Koreans, oh, they'll really flip up. So some of you might say, that's not very PC. Let me be honest. When there's a conflict between science and PC, political correctness, I hate PC. In fact, one of the books, now that I'm retired, I want to write a lot of books. Well, more. One of the books will be on PC versus science. All right. So, artificial brain technology is now in the air. It will grow and grow. The Koreans are very ambitious now. They are quasi-promising the Korean public that by 2020, just near 10 years, the government will aim to put a home robot, intelligent and useful, in every Korean household. Bill Gates, no one needs an introduction to him, he's on record as saying by about 2030, a mere 20 years away, most of you will see it, by then the home robot industry will be one of the largest, richest in the world. Why? Well, ask yourselves, how much did you pay for the last car that you bought? And ask yourselves, if you really, genuinely had an intelligent, useful home robot that would walk the dog, wash the dishes, wash the clothes, read you stories, entertain you, sex you, whatever, how much would you be prepared to pay for such a thing? More than a car? A lot of you would say yes. I mean, if it were genuinely useful and you're stimulated in your companion and infinite knowledge or whatever, you would pay big money for it. And that's what the marketeers are saying. So therefore, it's likely that the home robotic industry, based on artificial brains, with growing artificial intelligence levels, this will become big time in the 2020s. That's not far off. Okay, now we can get into this stuff. Okay, 10 minutes. I bought this a few years ago. This is already a museum piece, because it's only 4G. What are they up to now? 32, 64? Little thing like this? 128G? Tiny little memory stick? Okay, so you can imagine a similar phenomenon occurring with your home robot. So imagine you're in the 2020s and your neighbour, your friend, gives you a call and says, oh, come over and see my new home robot, the latest model. So you walk over and you're greeted at the door by the robot, and the robot cracks a joke. Wow, its vocabulary's gone up by 3 compared to my model. So what will you do? Well, in 2 weeks, you've gone out and launched yourself to the next generation, the next model. So now millions, if not billions of people will be doing this. So here's human IQ, human intelligence level. Let's say this level. And at a given date, here's a state-of-the-art home robot, AIQ, artificial intelligence version. But you're upgrading the whole time. So these machines just get smarter and smarter and smarter. So then what happens? As that gap between human level and machine level, as that gap closes, what's going to happen? What is virtually everybody going to start asking? Well, the questions are pretty obvious, right? I mean, one, hey, are these machines going to become as intelligent as human beings? Could they become more intelligent than human beings? Is that a good thing? Could that be dangerous? Might they threaten us if they're smarter than us? What if they don't like us? Yeah. Should we give them rights? Will they give us rights? Right? So I can imagine a great debate, a species dominance debate raging in the next 5 to 10 years. We will all see it. You guys are the harbingers of this debate. Right? You're the guys creating it and, well, propagating it. So if you're on the anti-side, the people who don't want these cyborgs to exist, the so-called, I call them Terrans, tear out the earth, because that's their perspective, whereas the people who want to build these art, I call them Cosmists, based on the word cosmos, because that's their perspective. Right? If you build these godlike creatures, where would they go? Would they stay on the earth? Probably not, because there's so much more out there. There are probably zillions of civilizations out there, far more advanced than we are. So probably they would leave the earth and get into the cosmos. So they call the people, the humans, in favour of building these godlike creatures, Cosmists. And of course there's a third group, the cyborgs. They're the people who want to become gods themselves. But it's a rather weak argument, I think, because so quickly you're an artilect, because of the huge computing capacity that the technologies will allow. Okay, so let's say 5 years from now, the debate will be raging. It'll just be part of every educated person's general knowledge, the way climate change is today. I see that coming. The Brits in 2006 had a big documentary on Horizon, and the topic was Human version 2. Maybe you've seen it on the internet. If you haven't, look it up. Human version 2. So they had Kurzweil and others talking about these issues. And it's now reaching mainstream in the US, this issue, and it will just grow and grow. And it's inevitable because it's inevitable because there's just so much economic momentum, technological momentum, to sell these home robots. It's going to happen. And as that IQ gap closes, then the debate will heat up and up and up. So just quickly, these three groups. So the Cosmists, the people who want to build them. The second group, the Terrans, the people who are afraid. And the third group, the cyborgs, who want to become gods themselves. Well, big picture argument, there's a whole universe out there, trillion stars. Why limit yourself to a puny little life snuffed out in 80 years when you live in a universe that's billions of years old? Right? So the Cosmist ideology is incredibly powerful. So that's why I call them Cosmists, to focus on the big picture. It could become a kind of religion. Right? You'd be building gods, but as a kind of scientifically based religion. It's based on science. It's not based on traditional ignorance and superstition, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So you'd be building gods. And how do you stop it? It's in our genes to strive, to climb Mount Everest and so on. Right? The human striving, how do you stop it? And the momentum, the economic momentum would be huge. You're talking industries of trillions of dollars a year. The PC industry today is worth about $1 trillion a year. Right? So the economic momentum would be enormous. And in the time frame we're talking about, there'd be kind of military momentum as well, because if China the present government manages to survive more than a decade or more, then the military momentum between rivalry between the US and China is worrying. So therefore, if you're Minister of Defense in one of those two countries, you do not have the luxury to allow the intelligence level of the soldier robots, military systems of the other country to get ahead of you, right? So even if the population is screaming, "Stop the robots! Stop the robots!" government won't listen. Right? National defense. So you have these momentum type arguments. Okay, the Terrans. What worries them? They're scared stiff that one day, once the artilects are so advanced, they might think and do this. Or, I just killed another million bacteria. I don't care. I'm human. And those bacteria? No, nothing. I don't care. So if these artilects come into being, and they are truly trillions of times above our capacities, why would they care about us? We're just so insignificant, so nothing. They may wipe us out inadvertently by, I don't know, getting rid of the oxygen because their circuitry can function better. Just as a side effect. The Terrans will fear these cyborgs. They're so alien and different. It's a gut-level, visceral fear and loathing. So they'll reject the cyborgs. And this evolutionary engineered circuitry is so complex, you can't understand it. So it's unpredictable. Right? So therefore, you would have no idea of the ethics of these creatures, these artilects. How would they feel about us? Right? Would they do this? Don't know. Risk. Key word in this whole debate, risk. You just don't know. So the Terrans, well, here's the punchline in a sense. The Terrans, I believe, will, if you're a Terran politician, you will argue that the only way to be sure there is no risk of humans being made number two is that the artilects are never built in the first place. Okay? It's the only way to ensure the risk is zero. But that's not going to work because you've got the Cosmists, almost as a form of religion, wanting to build them. So you get this bitter ideological dispute between these two groups. Okay? Now, Ray Kurzweil and I, we get on the media quite a lot, and we cross swords. Now, Kurzweil is highly cynical of my doom and gloom, major war coming scenario. He says, look, Hugo, you've got it all wrong. If it comes to a war between the Terrans and the Cosmists, that would be like a war between the US Army and the Amish. And you know the Amish, this religious sect in America, they limit themselves to 19th century technology, so they ride around in horse and buggy, and they don't use telephones. And they're sort of stuck in the 19th, frozen in the 19th century. And so I say to Ray, you're right, if the Terrans do nothing. If they just sit around and wait for the artilects to come into being and the cyborgs to come into being, then of course you're right. Okay? But these Terrans, they're not stupid. They're about half of the population. You can do surveys. Surveys have been done. About half the population are horrified by the idea. You were talking a bit about it this morning. The surveys have been done. So how will Terrans react? Well, they know, they're not stupid, right? They're humans like the Cosmists at the beginning. So I'm predicting they will say, we cannot afford to wait too long. If we do, we're doomed. These artilects, the cyborgs will exist, they'll be fait accompli, and then we'll just have to live with them. Our human fate will depend on them. We will be under their control, the way chickens and cows are under the control of humans. So they'll argue, if they want to get rid of and the Terrans will argue that it's better, it's the lesser evil, to wipe out, and I mean kill, wipe out a few million ardent Cosmists for the sake of the preservation of the billions of humans. They'll be political about it. So political organizations will be formed by the Terrans with the explicit goal to witch hunt and wipe out and exterminate the Cosmists. So I see the 21st century's global politics being dominated by this new issue of species dominance, or if you like, human preservation. And you have two very powerful ideologies, utterly opposed, murderously opposed. On the one hand, you're building gods, sense of awe, the whole universe, magnificent. And on the other hand, you're talking about the risk of seeing the whole human species wiped out. Very, very powerful. Okay, so there will be just a time window in which the Terrans can react. So I'm predicting they will first strike. You'll see the worst witch hunt. I mean, it made the, was it 17th century? Look. Is it 17th? Sorry, this used to be. The worst witch hunt that humanity's ever seen. Like in Germany, in the Hitler time, some academic was arrested for saying simply when it was Kristallnacht, the night the Nazis smashed the shop windows of the Jews and burned the synagogues, and Kristallnacht, because all the shop windows were breaking. He just said simply in German, Kulturschande, which is shame of the culture. And he was arrested and whisked off, and after some concentration camp, for saying two words. So I can imagine in the future if someone says, building gods. Scary, very scary. Right, now the cyborgs. Do I have time? No finishing code? The cyborgs, they argue, this is a human group, they say, we can avoid this confrontation between these two major groups by simply going around the problem We don't have to have Cosmists and Terrans fighting each other. By having humanity itself become gods. So human beings become artilects by cyborging, adding components to your brain. Now, I don't think that's going to work. It would only work if everyone did that lockstep, all at the same time. But that's unrealistic. Right? Probably what's going to happen is some people will just race ahead and become super cyborgs quickly, and then totally alienate the people left behind. So, I gave the example of the young mother. Some of you here are older. Imagine your adult children decide to go cyborg. And then suddenly you can no longer communicate with them because you're human and they're something else. Utterly alien. You'll feel that you have lost your children, your adult children. So as cyborgism spreads and spreads, there's ample scope, there's enormous scope for Murphy's Law. Things will go wrong. Especially certain things will go wrong. And then you'll get this enormous reaction of the Terrans and probably the percentage of Terranism in humanity's politics will rise. So the temperature, the general, the heat in the debate, the passion level will just skyrocket. Because you're talking this time about the survival of a species, not the survival of a country, not Russia, the Soviet Union, fighting the Nazis. They've got this greatest scourge that killed 20, 30 million of them. Right? You're not talking about the survival of a country this time, as in 20th century. You're talking the survival of a species. So the passion level will be so much higher. And, so that's what I'm talking about now. And here's the gloomy conclusion. If you were a European, and let's say it's the gay 90s, 1890s, right? A lot of optimism in Europe because the century had been largely peaceful, and then there were some major wars early on, the Napoleonic Wars, and given the scale of technology in those days, like you've probably heard of the famous Battle of Waterloo, right, where Napoleon was finally defeated in 1815. Okay? That famous day, how many killed? How many people died on that one day? About 70,000. Okay? And so for most of the century, relatively peaceful. And so a lot of optimism. So if you then, in your time machine, could go back and started talking to a group of 1890s people and saying, do you realize in 1914 and 1915, a few decades from now, your children will be involved in the worst war that humanity's ever known, the horrors of trench warfare, and there will be machines that can shoot out bullets, not one per minute, but about 10 in 1 second. Can you imagine what damage that would do? Well, let me try and demonstrate. I just killed all of them. Or big shells, this size, travel miles. That's your future.
Megadeath.
Megadeath. Yes, megadeath. Okay. So World War I, with World War I technologies, about 20 million died. And then World War II, depending on how you define it, like if you're Chinese, World War II started in 1937 when the Japs invaded. If you're European, World War II started in 1939 when Hitler invaded Poland. And if you're American, World War II started when the Japs, again, invaded Pearl Harbor. Okay? Now, admittedly, the Americans had turned off the oil supply to Japan, and they were down to about 3 days' reserves. You don't hear about that unless you go to Japan. So, each nation, each culture has blind sides. Right? You need to get a global history. Okay. So somewhere between 50 and 100 million died in World War II. If you just go up the graph, if there is a major war, towards in the second half of this century, 21st century, with 21st century technology, like nano weapons. Have you seen the latest version of the movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still? All these nano weapons just eating up everything? Yeah, that kind of thing. So the prediction then is not megadeath, but gigadeath. It would be the worst war ever in terms of the scale of the killing. That's today's pretty well state-of-the-art, most powerful supercomputer, and one of its uses is to simulate the brain. Like the most prestigious artificial brain project in the world is pioneered by a guy called Markram. He's South African, Swiss. Well, he's one of these multis, and he's simulating the brain. And his big dream, if you watch the BBC program, Human version 2, he's in that, and he's saying his big dream is that human beings can download their thoughts to machines, and vice versa. I mean, there it is, right? So, well, that's book 1, Chinese version. Okay. Now to finish 1 minute. The longer term picture. How will all this play out? Centuries from now. What's the final outcome? So if there is a war, well, 2 ways, right? The Terrans win or the Cosmists win. If the Terrans win, if they exterminate the Cosmists and place an absolute ban on Cosmist thought, then maybe they would survive for a while. But how are you going to stop the big dream? So the Cosmist dream is very powerful. Immortality, thinking 1,000,000 times faster or more, unlimited memory, change of shape with form. There would be intelligence theory. You could make yourself not just quantitatively with more memory and so on, but the very nature of your intelligence would go up because you have a much deeper understanding about what intelligence is. And you put all that into yourself. Off you go. So that dream would never go away. So you'd get a resurgence of Cosmist ideology. So then you go through another cycle. So eventually there may be a series of these wars until eventually the Cosmists win, and then they just do their thing. They create their artilects. And for all we know, out there are hyper-advanced civilizations that are artilects, but not at nano level. They may be at femto level, or atom level, or I don't know the words beyond that. But in theory, in terms of physics, as far as we know, the smallest level we can think of in our theories is the Planck scale, which is 10 to the minus 35 of a meter. Right? So there may be a Planck tech. I mean, the mind boggles, but all this is probably coming. The technology, the physics says that it's doable. So at the moment we're at the sort of nano level, but even that is a trillion times above what we are. And you square that if you go to Fermi level, and so on.